Okay, so in this example, we're asked to build off of the example where we wrote forall, where again forall was a logical vector that checked to see if all the elements of the vector were positive. So we're going to build off of forall, where instead of a for loop, we're going to use the find command, and the solution, and what we'll do when we work it up is we can show how to use a logical vector as well to achieve the same result. Okay, so I'm here over in MATLAB, and actually everything's still set up from when we just solved the previous example for forall. And so here was that version of the function, where again the purpose of forall is just, it's a logical function to check to see if all the elements are positive. Okay, so let's build off of this. So first we're told to use the find command. So I'm going to save a copy and call it forall find. Okay, so we'll use the find command, and then I'll edit the names accordingly. All right, it's even underlining. If I scroll over it, it tells me function name forall is known to MATLAB by its file name forall find. All right, so it's just a recommendation that you make them the same. Okay, cool. So the description actually is the same. Yeah, so rather than a loop, let's use find. Okay, so the way find works is if I were to do something of the nature of, say, y is equal to find x less than 0. Okay, so remember, if I'm looking to check to see if, we can say it a number of ways. So, how we can solve this problem is, if I want to look to see if all the elements are positive, I could check to see if I have any negative elements. If I don't have any negative elements, then they all must be positive. Okay. So what this statement would do, find or y, so variable assignment of find x less than 0 and assign the result to y. So this is the find command. So this is a logical statement. It'll check all of the elements of x, element-wise, to see if each is less than 0. If it is, it's going to return the vector containing all of those element indices. All of the element indices for which this statement is true. So if the first and third element of x are negative, what y will be is it'll be a vector that contains two elements, 1 and 3, corresponding to the indices of x for which that statement is true. Okay, cool. So then what I would want to look at is if all of the elements are positive, okay, then this statement is never true, so it shouldn't return any indices. And so then the check might be then is if y contains nothing, if y has a length of 0, then that means all the elements are positive because none of them are negative. Okay, so what we could do then is, so if the length of y is equivalent to 0, then no negative. We'd have res is equal to 1 for true. Otherwise, if it's not, then res would be equal to 0. Right? Oh, we already ended up that function. Okay. Cool. And we'll come back to what this is suggesting here. So if I were to run this, so let's start with this case where we expect it to be true, and I run forall find an x. I get a false. There's a non-positive element there. Okay, so I misspoke. My apologies. There's a negative element, so we'd expect it to be false, which it is. Okay. So what this is suggesting here is that when you're checking to see if you have a length of 0, you're better off to use the MATLAB built-in function isEmpty. Okay, and so isEmpty is just a logical function. So if I change this to isEmpty y. Okay. And actually, let me point something out. So when I hover over this, it uses capital letters for isEmpty and then length to 0. That's just the MATLAB notation. Okay, isEmpty, you would use lowercase letters. Okay, so this came up in the first chapter, if you recall, with old versions of MATLABs, and from the command window, it's a confusing point of the documentation. So if I run this version of the code, we get the same thing. Okay, so now what this is saying is, you're better off, rather than just having a find here with isEmpty. Typically, you indicate a dimension, but that's not of anything use here. Okay, cool. So that works. The other way you could, tackle this is if we were to check to see if, or return the element indices for which it's positive. We could just have, if length of y is equivalent to length of x, then res is equal to 1. Okay, that would mean that all positive, else res is equal to 0. Right, and so you could do the checking for all positives. All right, so I have a typo here, and that would be just as applicable and give you the same result. So there's lots of different ways to solve it with find. A logical vector, we could just as well use a logical vector. So if we just did y, okay, stored to y, the result of the logical check x greater than 0. Okay, so this will work as is. Right, this equals a variable assignment. But if you're unsure about order of operations, you could put the logical check in parentheses. So x greater than 0. So MATLAB will go through x element y's and check to see if each element's greater than 0. The result will be a logical vector. Y will be a logical vector of 1s and 0s. 1 if the corresponding element, or the statement for the corresponding element of x is true, 0 if it's false. And so then what we could do is we could say sum it up. So if I wanted to do, say, a logical check, it could be equal to, say, sum of y. And if the sum of y, which I just called logical check, is equivalent to the length of x, then it's true. Otherwise, it's false. So again, if the statement is true, then 1 is what corresponds to true. So if this is a logical vector, and the statement is true for all of the elements of x, y will be a vector of just 1s. So if I sum it up, it should be equivalent to the length of x, right? And it gives me the same thing. Okay, so there's lots of different ways to solve the same problem. I apologize here. I just realized that I kept overwriting the same file. So what will be uploaded to the YouTube video is this final version here. But hopefully you can see how you can go and change it accordingly.